I continue to say the business model works in a place like New York or Philadelphia or Baltimore or DC or any major city. Once you get there's a critical mass of a city, I think that you need to have where it needs to work. And you can probably count those on two hands, right, in this country. Welcome back to Car-Pinionated, our weekly show on cars, the car industry, and driving in general, and some opinions too. I think tonight we will have opinions. I'm Doug Stewart, digital executive producer for Fox 61 in Hartford. And with me are Jeff Buchholz from WBBM in Chicago and Glenn Packman from beautiful Fairfield County, noted comedian and car enthusiast. So, gentlemen, within the past couple weeks, they had a thing on the Warner Brothers lot in beautiful Hollywood, California, and they introduced some new vehicles from Tesla, and they brought out what we used to refer to as the Robotaxi, but now apparently it's called the Cybercab, and they kind of use the phrase interchangeably. Now, I have some thoughts about the whole presentation, what they showed off, a lot of things. But I'm gonna go let you guys go first. Jeff, what were your thoughts on the We Robot experience?
So I think it's a perfect metaphor that the whole presentation at Warner's was apparently inspired by Blade Runner 2049, which within a week of the event triggered a lawsuit from one of the producers of Blade Runner 2049, which is really consistent with the CEO's sort of do it and clean it up afterward later sort of mentality and mindset, and it works fine in some areas and not so fine maybe in others. First of all, my strong suspicion is that the Cybercab is the body form of the $25,000 Tesla that we were promised at one point, but evidently is not happening now.
Right.
And because the company seems to be very committed to the idea of full self-driving, which of course is now the subject of its own investigation by federal regulators. We'll leave that to the side for a minute. I think it provided an opportunity or a platform to be a showcase for this technology. Here's this car which can function as a taxi that you can buy and send out into the world to do your rideshare bidding while you sit at home and count your money, which is the complete business case for this car, by the way, which he says, the CEO says, will be somewhere around $30,000. Let's also keep something very important in mind as we go through this conversation, that at the beginning of the presentation, there was a giant slide at the beginning, which essentially was the asterisk on everything that came afterward. It's a very SEC required boilerplate kind of thing, saying the comments made here are forward-looking statements. They may not represent what actually comes out of the company, blah, 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 blah. So this was not so much a definitive rollout, I think, as a what if conversation with the CEO of Tesla. And it's probably best to consider it as that, because essentially the disclaimer at the beginning allows one to take everything that the CEO said and add or not at the end of it. And then he's off the hook, or the company's off the hook.
Right.
As far as the car itself, I actually think it's pretty decent looking. It's pretty slick. It looks like a Tesla while also looking different enough and new enough. Because remember, the oldest Teslas now are 12 years old and have really not changed in form factor at all. Even the derivatives thereof look pretty much the same. But it's a pretty decent looking car. I am not at all certain that a two-door coupe is what I would have picked for an ideal cab. But I suppose if you're not carrying a driver, you don't need four doors. Maybe that's the way they're looking at it. But again, it's a two-door taxi cab that can make money for you while you sit at home or not. My one regret was that they did this whole big thing at the Warner's lot and somehow could not cut a deal for Yakko, Wacko, and Dot the Animaniacs to run down and be part of the presentation. I would have been far more interested in that.
Yeah, that probably got, they probably ended up with a bunch of lawyers in a room, said, no, we're not going to do it.
Well, I suppose too, since the CEO sometimes envisions himself as the brain in the Pinky and the Brain spinoff, there might have been an issue there as well.
Yeah, yeah. Glenn, what are you thinking about the whole thing?
Oh, if I don't have a lot of positive things to say, we get a lot of negative feedback. I guess there's an idea there, all right. And in a perfect world, it might be even a hell of an idea that we have an entire fleet of cabs that run themselves. But my first question is, okay, so realistically, how many years are we away from this? And is this company really doing right by itself to spend the time and energy pursuing something that might not ever actually gel? I guess I'm being old and poopy by saying, oh, I don't think this is going to work, but I don't think it's going to work. Moreover, the presentation it really grated on me because it was all style and no substance.
Yeah.
And it's like, forgive me, I constantly feel like Elon Musk is constantly after the next cool thing. Like it's this brass ring that he's constantly trying to reach for. And I wish he'd just cut it out, I think, really, if Tesla was working on something a little bit more tangible right now, that might make them a better car company. But instead, we get the Cybertruck, which is I'm sorry, is a joke. Every time I see one, I just burst into hysterics. It's just, it might be the greatest car on the planet, but it's funny looking and it's weird, And P.S. the styling on this new little car was kind of cool, but there were nods to the Cybertruck that I wish they had just gotten rid of, to be honest. But moreover, I think like if Elon Musk was treating his car company like a normal quote unquote car company, he'd be way too bored by it. And that doesn't make it interesting for the rest of us, it's a lot of glamour and a lot of oh, that's cool, but is it functionable? I would love for him to prove me wrong and end up with something that's earth shaking. My opinion, I don't think it's it, but it's his money to blow, I guess, is the moral of that story. But I'd rather see something that me as a consumer that I might actually be really interested in looking at driving, ending up with one in my garage rather than something that was like, oh, well, that's a great concept,
Yeah. I think the two-passenger thing is a non-starter for me. I get the fact that let's assume that they've done studies and said that, two passengers are the most that go into a cab. Okay. But it doesn't seem to work for me. Once again, you have these doors that are, just waiting to break. I mean, I will be, this is my grumpy old man piece, is that all these things that are really cool and slick and great to look at, have to work for the next 15 years, right? The legality of it, right? The full self-driving, which he said, well, maybe 26, maybe 2027. And like, dude, you've been promising that for years and you're just not there. You haven't shown any kind of movement towards it. And plus you have regulators who are on your back, saying, well, how come this happened? And how come this happened? And it's it's a, 1968 promises from Broadway, and I'm just I'm just tired of this, and the way he presents it, and just like, oh, this is this great idea. Oh yeah, well, you can have your one car and you have it do your work, do this stuff while you're at work, and well, maybe you have 10 or 20, right? And so now you've gone from a $30,000 investment to a $300,000 or $600,000 investment, and like, who's coming up with that scratch? I just don't see it. I just don't get it. And at the end of the day, all those vehicles have to come home to rest. They're not working 24/7, right? They've got to charge, right? On this magical insta charging plate of some nature, right? And though that's a great idea for the people who live with land who can make those things and park these 10 cars, right? And also, oh, well, it's saving a lot of money. No, it's really not, And I continue to say the business model works in a place like New York or Philadelphia or Baltimore or DC or any major city. Once you get there's a critical mass of a city, I think, that you need to have where it needs to work. And you can probably count those on two hands, right, in this country. So that's the whole thing, the whole infrastructure thing. And they showed at one point, because this has been my question, like, I have been in some cabs that were kind of, you know, and people may or may not be in the best of health when they get into a cab, right? And without getting too graphic about it, they showed these big robot vacuum cleaners going in and vacuuming. They're like, where does that live? Where
Right.
do you have, like,
Right.
this one place that, after every ride, the car goes zipping through the Tesla car wash? Well, it's just like, come on, right? And okay, so that's that. But then we have the Robovan or Robovan, I think is how he pronounced it. Like, what? What the hell? Right? Which is awesome for a place with no inclines, completely flat pavement, and no driveways. Right? You can't do anything with this unless it's totally flat, because you have it looked like about less than 6 inches worth of ground clearance, angle of departure and angle of approach, all that SUV stuff, that just like, no, and what problem? I'm sorry, I'm ranting, and if you want to stop me, go ahead. But this really whole thing just ticked me off. It really bothered me. The seating is ridiculous in those Robovans, and all these people facing each other. What problem are you trying to solve? Why don't buses work for every circumstance? We seem to have solved buses, right, in a city, right? I think it makes an excellent airport shuttle where you have people getting on, getting off, and moving right through the system. But then you have the whole thing with the trunk. Did anyone notice, like, the trunk opens up so people put their stuff in the trunk and then they go in the van? Great. Okay. They get to a stop. Somebody else gets out first, opens the trunk, and they steal their groceries or their violin case or their briefcase or whatever, right? To have, like, because you can't see that because you're inside the thing without any windows and somebody's outside that whole thing. I didn't get it. I didn't understand it. What the point was. It just pained me. And then there's the robots. The Optimus robot, right? What? Why? Why can't you just leave it alone and let Boston Dynamics do a much better job at doing that stuff, right? Because $30,000 to have a humanoid looking thing in my house. Why? What? Because it can vacuum? The $300, Roomba can do that. Make dinner. I'll get, a meal service. It didn't make sense. It was like, oh, this flight of fancy. And Glenn said this. It's this like, oh, great idea. Awesome, but even for the richest man in the world, resources are finite. Resources have a certain, thing. The last thing I will say on my rant. I and Jeff, you know this, and Glenn, you also know this. When you have an event like that, you produce it. You have an idea about what's
Yeah.
coming first,
Yeah.
what's coming second, how this is all going to play together. He stood up there and kind of acted like this is the first time he's seen anything like this. I mean, I have come through years of watching Apple keynotes where Steve Jobs, Tim Cook, have got out there and just maybe not electric presences, but they really sold the whole thing, and it looked complete and thought through. It's the day after the hurricane hits the Tampa Bay area, right? And what's one of the three pictures that you have in your presentation of stadiums, which never really made sense of why he was. They have three pictures of stadiums in there. One of them is Tropicana Field, which had the roof ripped off the day before.
Yeah.
And then just kept repeating, right? Jeff, you've done a lot of TV, right? You're looping that video. That's the last thing you want to have is those three shots coming over and over and over.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will step down now and breathe again.
I
But
am
it just
so glad. I'm so glad that you mentioned the condition of most cabs
Right.
after they've been out for a little while. And if you talk
Sure.
to any rideshare driver, and one of the biggest issues they have is people, I'll just say it, getting sick inside their cars. That takes them out of commission for, a period of time while they clean the thing up so it's not gross. And when you're doing that, you're not making any money. So
Right.
is there some kind of an alarm that goes off and the car has to go, to some sterilization center? What happens if some woman is getting into the car and some jerk gets in with her that she doesn't want there while waiting for the doors to close?
Right. Right.
What does she do then? Help, I'm trapped in a self-driving car?
Right.
I do think, Doug, I'm so glad that you could unburden yourself in this audience. I do think that it would help you a lot to remember the phrase that helps me when I look at a presentation like this from Tesla, and the phrase is "or not." Because really, this is just blue skying from the CEO, who, I think you're right, Glenn, is bored by running a car company.
Yeah, absolutely.
And is trying very hard to make himself interested in running a car company. So this stuff just sort of comes up. And
he's desperately trying to be the idea guy. He wants to be the guy with the next great idea. And he's constantly doing that to the point where it's annoying. I don't know if you saw the film Glass Onion, but they did a very, very thinly veiled. Ed Norton's character is pretty much Elon Musk, and it was the same thing. It was like, I'm going to send an invitation to a party, but it's going to be a huge mechanical puzzle box that you need to figure out. How about an envelope? It's like, okay, so a big mechanical puzzle box is fun, and it probably costs about $100,000 to make. And if I had, 48 hours to sit there and try and figure it out, cool. If it's just an invitation to a party, I think I'd rather get it,
and
not that he did that, but it would be typical.
Right. The other thing, Doug, that you mentioned, or one of you mentioned, was the issue with regulation as it relates to full self-driving and a lot of the other potential issues with this business model. Let's remember that and this is not a political podcast, and I'm certainly not interested in having it be that, but there is a scenario in the election process where the CEO of Tesla would essentially be regulating his own companies because Tesla and its subsidiaries are so entwined now with a lot of the high-tech initiatives the government is doing. Look at SpaceX and NASA and that kind of thing. So I think one of the things that the CEO is hoping for is that the outcome of the presidential election puts him in a position where he can set the regulation for some of these technologies. And as is his usual wont, let other people clean up the effects of that.
Right. There's a Facebook group that I belong to for this town, and they post old pictures, right? And not very far from here, there was a river that went through, and there were paper mills upstream in this river. And people in the town, up until the 50s, the 40s and 50s, this stream went through what's now a park. And you could tell apparently you could tell what kind of paper was being made by the color of the pond and the river.
Ooh.
Right? And, oh, I miss those days. Well, you know something? What were those chemicals?
Yeah.
Right?
What in the Superfund side are they talking about?
Right, exactly. And I sit there and I think there's a reason why we don't depend on companies to self-regulate. Because they don't do a very good job of it. Any company, it's a business, and it exists to make money, and that's capitalism, and that's great. But you just don't want to leave the fox in the hen house. I don't think that's that may be close to the saying, but
no, that's you have the fox guarding the hen house. You do not want that. You got it.
Right.
Go ahead, Glenn.
I've just to add, when I was watching the video, two things popped in my mind. When the gull-wing doors opened up, I was like, what happens if they don't open up? What happens if they fail? Cars fail all the time. Mechanics, these things, especially new technology, come on. It's just...
Especially new Tesla technology.
Yeah, what happens when someone gets stuck in a car? What happens if somebody, runs a light and smashes into one of these things and someone's injured inside? What happens when people who are bored in the real world realize that these things are automated and they don't have anybody really watching them? I mean, then we're talking about vandalism, easy, fun vandalism. It's an easy target.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Right. No, I think it's a very good, especially because these are things that are going to be used in an urban environment where that sort of thing is more likely to happen, unfortunately. But I mean, come on, you're a bunch of people standing around. Oh, there goes one of those cars. Let's throw an apple at it, because you can.
Especially because products of that company have become so symbolic of their very polarizing CEO. They, by their nature, make themselves a target. I mean, a non-zero number of Cybertruck owners have already talked about seeing, having to repair vandalism, some kind of damage to their car caused by somebody up in high dudgeon about the company and its operations, which is not something any of us on this podcast condone or recommend, by the way.
Not
Leave
at all.
people's cars alone, no matter how compensatory they might be.
Right. It would be a wonderful world if this kind of thing where it was like, oh God, no one's ever going to vandalize a self-driving car. Well,
I don't know what world that is. Yeah. I don't know. I just was like, the whole thing just really annoyed me. And then according to Bloomberg, the robots weren't self-actualizing. They weren't on their own. They were being managed by somebody. It was a remote thing. Because the
like that robot that keeps trotting out at the Ford Auto Show exhibits for the last 20 years, that guy? Wow. Oh,
Doug, you have
you
to
think
use
you
your
know somebody.
imagination. You know, they're
I
asking
know.
you to they're asking you to make that leap, and you know,
Well, I mean,
imagine.
the last time we saw a Tesla robot, it was literally a dude in a robot suit.
Right. Right.
So this is actually progress, is what we're talking about, I guess.
Yeah,
I just
they
don't-
were very
Uh-huh.
clear. The shots were very clear. Like it had a waist that was, this big, and everything was articulated off of that. So they can't. It's not a guy in there this time. He's just in backstage, and with the toggle sticks and everything, and because they talked about like each robot had a different voice, right? It wasn't the same voice that was coming out of each robot, and the responses were too fast to have it be AI responses. And those are the things I saw. But the Bloomberg, thing was pretty clear on it. But go back, just make cars, make better cars,
Right.
make
Right.
cars that look different.
What Doug
Right?
said.
And that's what is it, Jeff? You say unique selling proposition, USP.
Yeah, the unique selling proposition, exactly.
Right. Make a car.
Mm.
It's a car. A car is fine. There's nothing wrong with a car. People like cars, Anyway, any other things? I don't want to just keep going on this. Because I sound like
I was just waiting for them to get out the cannon thing and shoot something at the windows to show us how unbreakable they were. That went well. Speaking of vandalism, a little bit of self-vandalism there.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right, that's going to do it for this week. I will go back and calm down, and I'll be much better off. But thank you for allowing me to vent my frustration.
That's why we're here.
All right.
It's the title of the show.
Right. Exactly. Remember to like and subscribe to us on YouTube. It helps out the little algorithm. If you have suggestions for topics you'd like to see, please be in touch with us. And with that, we will bid you a fond farewell.